The recording device sits before me, and I hesitate. What I am about to document will change the course of galactic politics forever. Assuming I survive long enough to submit my findings to the High Council, my outer membranes are still quivering and my respiration sacs have yet to return to their normal rhythm. What I've discovered, by the eternal void, I wish I could unknow it. I am Zex'Tral, Senior Xenobiologist of the Collective Intelligence Network, specializing in sapient behavioral analysis. My credentials are impeccable. I have cataloged 317 species across 12 galactic sectors. I have defined the threat matrix assessments for the most dangerous predators ever encountered. I have survived direct observation of the crystal hunters of Dene Bathoth and the hive warriors of the Scorpius cluster. But humans? Oh, what terrible miscalculation we have made with humans. Let me begin with context. The Grand Galactic Accord has for millennia maintained relative peace through a complex network of treaties, trade agreements, and a ban on warfare between signatory species. Disputes are settled through diplomatic channels or, in extremis, by hiring specialized mercenary forces from approved sources, typically the Kral, whose natural aggression and hierarchical psychology makes them ideal combatants, or the Vespid collectives, whose hive mind efficiency in tactical operations is unparalleled, or so we believed. 3 standard cycles ago, a small human mercenary company calling themselves Obsidian Shield appeared on the interstellar market. Their services were initially dismissed as irrelevant, humans being newcomers to galactic society. Barely 2 centuries into faster-than-light travel, their homeworld, a mundane terrestrial planet orbiting an unremarkable G-type star, suggested nothing exceptional. My first direct observation of humans in combat occurred during the Procyon border dispute. The hegemony of Sirius had hired Obsidian Shield, just 27 humans, to defend a remote mining outpost against Kral forces, nearly 10 times their number. I was present as a neutral observer, as required by Accord protocols. What I witnessed that day haunted my nightmares until I finally understood what I was seeing. The Kral commander, General Kavax, deployed standard overwhelming force tactics, a frontal assault designed to break the psychological will of opponents through the sheer terror of facing Kral berserkers. This approach has proven effective in 89.7% of documented conflicts. It should have worked. The probability matrices suggested human casualties would reach 90% within the first offensive wave. Instead, the humans didn't break. They didn't retreat. And most disturbingly, they didn't die. At first, I attributed their survival to technological superiority. Their armor systems were admittedly impressive. Adaptive, self-repairing exoskeletons with integrated weapon platforms, but technology alone couldn't explain what happened next. A human male, later identified as Captain Jackson Mitchell, led a counteroffensive so brutally efficient that my analytical algorithms initially flagged the data as corrupted. His neural interface with the battlefield systems operated at speeds that seemed impossible for organic processing. His squad's coordinated movements displayed a level of strategic adaptation that even the Vespid collectives cannot match. But it wasn't until I reviewed the biological data that the true horror revealed itself. Humans call it adrenaline. We call it evolutionary insanity. Every known sentient species in the galaxy evolved to prioritize survival. When faced with mortal danger, neural systems activate preservation protocols, retreat, surrender, whatever maximizes survival probability. Humans do the opposite. Their adrenal response does not prioritize escape. It enhances combat capability. Their cardiovascular efficiency increases, muscle strength amplifies, even cognitive processing accelerates, but with a focus on threat elimination rather than threat avoidance. Evolution shaped humans not to survive conflict, but to win it. This biological aberration alone would be concerning. But there's more, much more. After the Procyon incident, I began a comprehensive analysis of human combat personnel. The collective granted me unprecedented access to medical scans, neural patterns, and psychological profiles of Obsidian Shield operatives. What I discovered has kept me from proper sleep cycles for weeks. I now understand why humans frightened the Cray. And the Cray fear nothing. It begins with their brain structure. Unlike most sapient species who developed intelligence as a specialization distinct from primitive instincts, human cognition is fundamentally integrated with their ancient limbic systems. Their higher reasoning doesn't replace or suppress primal responses. It enhances them. This became clear during my interview with Mitchell 3 days ago. I had secured permission to conduct a detailed psychological assessment, ostensibly as part of standard mercenary certification procedures. The collective intelligence network had questions that needed answers, particularly after Obsidian Shield's contract rates quadrupled following Procyon. Mitchell arrived at my laboratory precisely on schedule. He stood 1.9 meters tall with the typical bipedal symmetry of his species, though more physically imposing than the average human. What struck me immediately was the controlled stillness of his movements, not the mechanical precision of the mechanideds or the calculated efficiency of the vespids, but something more predatory. "Captain Mitchell," I began, my translation field properly calibrated. "Thank you for agreeing to this assessment." His response was courteous, professional. "Happy to help, Dr. Zex'Tral. Your reputation precedes you." "Oh?" I hadn't expected a human to be familiar with xenobiological academia. "Your paper on Krull pack dynamics changed our approach to engaging their forces," he said. "Particularly your observations about their susceptibility to leadership decapitation strategies." I felt my primary heart flutter with alarm. My research had been purely theoretical, never intended as a combat manual against a galactic accord species. "That's not the intended application of my work," I managed. "Knowledge is just a tool," Mitchell replied with what humans call a smile. "How it's applied depends on the craftsman." I redirected to my prepared questions, activating the full suite of biometric scanners embedded in the interview chamber. "Captain, I'd like to understand the psychological profile of human mercenaries. What motivates your species to excel in combat roles?" What followed was fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. As Mitchell spoke, I watched his neural patterns, hormone levels, micro-expressions, all the biological tells that betray deception or obfuscation across species. He didn't lie, but he didn't tell the complete truth either. "Humans have always been warriors," he explained. "Throughout our history, combat has been a constant. While many species evolved toward specialization, we remained adaptable generalists. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced, but we're the most determined." His neural patterns showed peculiar activation in regions associated with memory recall, particularly areas linked to emotional processing. "Could you elaborate on this determination?" I asked. "Other species fight until they determine victory is impossible. Humans fight until victory is achieved, regardless of probability." My scanners indicated elevated dopamine levels as he made this statement. Pleasure response. The concept genuinely satisfied him. "That contradicts basic evolutionary psychology," I noted. "Self-preservation is the foundation of all behavior evolution." Mitchell leaned forward slightly. "That's where everyone misunderstands us. Human evolution didn't prioritize individual survival. It prioritized group survival. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves if it ensures our people continue." This, I discovered later, was a half-truth. Human history reveals something far more complex. They don't merely sacrifice themselves for their group. They destroy themselves and everything around them rather than accept defeat. As our interview concluded, Mitchell asked a question that now seems ominous in retrospect. "Doctor, do you know why the Krella haven't taken another contract against humans since Procyon?" I admitted I did not. "Because we returned their general's ceremonial blade to their homeworld, along with his head." The biometric scanners registered no elevation in stress hormones as he delivered this information, no emotional reaction whatsoever, just a flat statement of fact. After Mitchell left, I spent 3 days reviewing all available data on human combat encounters. What I found confirms my worst fears and reveals the true danger humans pose to galactic stability. It isn't their technology. It isn't even their biology. It's their psychology. Humans don't just adapt to warfare. They evolve through it. Each conflict makes them more effective, more lethal. They learn collectively and individually, at rates that defy standard cognitive models. And most terrifying of all, they appear to enjoy the process. The Kral fight because aggression is their evolutionary imperative. The Vespids fight because collective defense requires it. Humans fight because something in their psychology transforms violence into satisfaction. I've traced this aberration to a neurochemical cycle unique to humans. When they face a threat, overcome it, and survive, their brains release a complex cocktail of rewarding neurochemicals. This creates a feedback loop: threat, adaptation, success, neurological reward. In evolutionary terms, this is insanity. It encourages risk-taking and conflict rather than avoidance. Yet somehow, this defect became their greatest advantage. And now, their advantage threatens to destabilize the entire mercenary paradigm that has maintained galactic peace. My latest intelligence reports indicate that 17 new human mercenary companies have formed in the past standard cycle. Their contract rates undercut the Kral by 30%, and the Vespids by 40%. They're systematically targeting the established mercenary market, and they're winning. But the economic disruption is merely a symptom of a greater problem. As I compile this report, I've received disturbing news from the Arcturus sector. A minor trade dispute between the Minotard Federation and the Orion Concordat escalated to armed conflict when both parties hired human mercenaries. Let me repeat, humans fought humans. This violates the most fundamental principle of mercenary protocols, that hired forces serve as extensions of their employer's will, not independent combatants. Yet, according to eyewitness accounts, the human companies engaged each other with a ferocity that shocked even their employers. The battle lasted 17 hours. Conventional models predicted a 3-day engagement. When it ended, the survivors from both human companies gathered their dead, exchanged information, and departed on seemingly amicable terms. They were not enemies. They were not even competitors. They were practicing. I've reviewed the combat telemetry from Arcturus. The human mercenaries on both sides employed experimental tactics, weapons configurations, and battle strategies that have never been documented in any previous conflict. They were using a real dispute with real stakes as a testing ground for innovation. This is unprecedented in mercenary culture. It suggests a level of coordination that transcends corporate identity, a species-wide approach to perfecting warfare. The implications are staggering. If humans continue to dominate the mercenary market, they will eventually control all sanctioned conflict resolution in accord space. Every dispute becomes their laboratory, every battleground their classroom. They are transforming galactic warfare into a human specialty, a human monopoly, and we have invited them to do so. Wait, something's wrong. My security perimeter just registered an anomaly. The outer barrier has... Recording interruption. 47 seconds. Still recording. Good. I don't have much time. Someone has breached my laboratory security. The synthetic voice on the communication system claims to be facility maintenance, but my Vespid security staff are not responding to verification requests. I'm transferring this data to my secure quantum entanglement transmitter. If you're receiving this, honored council members, you must understand what we're facing. Humans aren't just mercenaries. They're not just soldiers. They are warfare embodied, a species that has transformed conflict into an art form, a science and a religion all at once. And now they know we know. I hear footsteps outside my laboratory. Heavy, purposeful, human footsteps. There's more I haven't told you. Something I discovered in Mitchell's neural scans that I'm still struggling to comprehend. A pattern I've never seen in any species. A capability that defies scientific explanation. If I'm right, then humans aren't just dangerous because of what they do. They're dangerous because of what they are. The door is opening. I see a human figure, male, in unmarked armor. He's holding something in his end of recording. Emergency session transcript. High Council of the Collective Intelligence Network Security Level Omega attendees. Full quorum of sector representatives. I did not expect to survive the encounter in my laboratory. The human mercenary who breached my security systems had every opportunity to eliminate me. Yet here I stand before the High Council, my respiratory sacs still functioning, my neural pathways intact. This fact alone should terrify you as much as it does me. Senior Xenobiologist Zex'Tral. High Counselor Vex Mora's voice resonates through the ancient chamber, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with skepticism. Your preliminary report contains assertions that many find difficult to accept. The council chamber, a vast biological construct, suspended within the heart of the intelligence network's central node, surrounds me with the representatives of 217 species. Their combined consciousness weighs upon my perception like a gravitational singularity. I feel their doubt, their fear, and worst of all, their disbelief. With respect, High Counselor, I reply, my voice membranes vibrating with controlled urgency. Difficulty of acceptance does not negate reality. The human threat is unprecedented, and my survival proves it. Counselor Thrix, representing the silicon-based crystalline dominion, interrupts with a sharp harmonic tone. Explain again how you survived this alleged assassination attempt. Your report lacks clarity on this critical point. I activate the neural projector embedded in my ceremonial collar, allowing my memory engrams to manifest as holographic imagery above the council pool. The scene plays out in perfect fidelity, the laboratory door sliding open, the human figure entering, weapon raised. As you can see, I narrate as the memory unfolds. The human disabled my quantum entanglement transmitter with a targeted electromagnetic pulse. He then approached my position, applied a neural suppressor to my primary ganglia cluster, and said these words. The hologram captures the human's voice with perfect clarity. Dr. Zex'Tral, you've been asking interesting questions. Now it's time for some answers. But not here. Captain Mitchell would like to continue your conversation, personally. I paused the projection. I was then transported unconscious to an unregistered vessel in low orbit. Upon regaining sensory function, I found myself in the presence of Captain Jackson Mitchell, the same human mercenary commander I had interviewed previously. High Counselor Vex Mora's membranes flush with alarmed coloration. You were abducted by human mercenaries, yet they released you to deliver this report. This defies logical analysis. Logic is precisely what we must reconsider when dealing with humans, I respond. Mitchell wanted me to deliver this message to you. He wanted the collective to know what they are capable of. This was not an assassination attempt. It was a demonstration. I resume the neural projection. Now the council witnesses my conversation with Mitchell aboard the human vessel. The sterile utilitarian environment, the complete absence of restraints, the casual posture of the human commander as he sits across from me, sipping what I would later learn is called coffee. Dr. Mitchell's recorded voice echoes through the council chamber. I believe we have a mutual interest in understanding each other better. Your research has come to the attention of certain parties who find it enlightening. My recorded response sounds pathetically fearful, even to my own auditory receptors. You intercepted a secure quantum transmission. That technology is beyond human capability. Mitchell's laugh, that uniquely human expression of amusement, sends ripples of discomfort through the assembled council representatives. There's a lot about human capability that isn't in your databases, he says. That's why I'm going to release you with a complete data package. Take it to your council. Let them see what we can do, and what we choose not to do. I terminate the projection. The data package I was given contains comprehensive documentation of human combat operations spanning the last 73 standard cycles, including conflicts predating their arrival in interstellar society. The evidence supports my central thesis. Humans possess a unique neurobiological trait that makes them the most dangerous sentient species we have ever encountered. What is this trait? Demands Counselor Gex of the Methane Collective, her vapor form shimmering with impatience. They call it flow state, I reply. A neurological condition in which the human brain functions at peak cognitive and physical performance. All sentient species have documented performance peaks. But human flow state is fundamentally different. It is not merely an optimization of existing capability, it is a transformation of consciousness itself. I activate a second neural projection, this one compiled from the human data package. It shows medical scans of human brain activity during combat operations. Observe the neural activity patterns I direct. In normal conditions, human brains operate with distinct functional regions: cognition, emotion, memory, sensory processing, all separated by clear neurological boundaries. But in flow state, these boundaries dissolve. The entire neural network functions as a unified system, processing information at rates that should be biologically impossible. The projection shifts to battlefield footage. A human mercenary designation, Thomas Reynolds, tactical specialist, moves through a complex urban environment under heavy fire from Kral forces. The recording includes a temporal counter and biometric overlay. At time index 4723, Reynolds enters flow state. I narrate. Note the immediate changes in his movement patterns, reaction time, and decision-making processes. He is processing battlefield information and responding to threats faster than neural signals should be able to travel through a carbon-based nervous system. The Council watches in stunned silence as Reynolds navigates a kill zone that probability algorithms rate as 99.8% fatal. He doesn't just survive, he eliminates 14 Kral elite warriors in 31.7 seconds. This cannot be real, insists Counselor Thrix. The footage must be manipulated. I had the same reaction, I acknowledge. However, I have personally witnessed similar human performances. Moreover, the data package includes detailed neurobiological explanations for this phenomenon. I display the relevant technical information: brain scans, neurochemical analyses, genetic markers. The human flow state appears to be an evolutionary adaptation unique to their species. Under conditions of extreme stress, their neural architecture reconfigures itself, consciousness expands, time perception dilates, information processing accelerates beyond normal biological constraints. Counselor's index of the photonic consciousness leans forward, her light form pulsing with intense curiosity. If this is accurate, it suggests humans can temporarily transcend normal material limitations of organic intelligence. The philosophical implications are disturbing. The practical implications are far worse, I respond. This ability gives humans an insurmountable advantage in combat scenarios, and there's more. I activate the final neural projection footage from an engagement in the Tau Ceti system. It shows two human mercenaries, designations William Baker, assault specialist, and James Harrison, combat engineer, fighting back-to-back against a superior force of Vespid drone warriors. Observe their neural patterns, I instruct. Both humans enter flow state nearly simultaneously, but now watch the synchronization pattern. The brain scan overlays show something impossible: neural activity between the two humans aligning in perfect harmony despite no physical connection between them. They're operating as a unified system, I explain. Not through technology, not through telepathy as we understand it, but through some form of emergent quantum entanglement at the neural level. This explains the unprecedented coordination observed in human combat teams. High Counselor Vex Mora's bioluminescent patterns pulse with alarm frequencies I've never witnessed in 300 cycles of service. If humans can spontaneously generate neural entanglement, she says slowly, our entire understanding of consciousness must be reconsidered. Precisely, I confirm. And this ability scales with group size. The data shows that larger human combat units can achieve collective flow states that multiply their effectiveness exponentially. A small team operating in synchronized flow can outperform forces many times their size. The council chamber erupts in a cacophony of alarmed communication voice patterns, pheromone releases, electromagnetic pulses, and quantum vibrations, all expressing variations of the same primal response: fear. High Counselor Vex Mora restores order with a harmonic pulse that momentarily disrupts all other communication. What are the limitations of this ability? She demands. That's the most concerning aspect, I reply. Human flow state was once limited by duration and recovery requirements. Early documentation shows humans could maintain the state for only minutes before neurological exhaustion. But they have been systematically training to extend this duration. Current data indicates elite human operatives can sustain flow for hours and recover within a single sleep cycle. Counselor Jex ripples with agitation. If the Accord's stability rests upon balanced power among mercenary forces, and humans possess an insurmountable advantage, we face a foundational threat to galactic peace. There's another factor to consider, I add. Flow state is not limited to combat applications. The data package includes documentation of humans achieving similar neural states in research, engineering, diplomatic negotiations, even artistic endeavors. This suggests their evolutionary adaptation enhances not just warfare, but all forms of problem-solving and creativity. I pause, allowing the implications to penetrate the collective consciousness of the Council. In essence, humans are evolving before our sensors, not over generations but within individual lifespans. Each time they enter flow state, neural pathways are reinforced. Each challenge they overcome strengthens this ability. They are self-optimizing intelligence in organic form. Counselor Zindex's light form dims to near invisibility, a sign of deep contemplation among photonic beings. If this is true, she finally says, containment may be the only logical response. We must isolate humanity before they dominate all critical functions of galactic society. Isolation is impractical, counters Counselor Thrix. Humans already operate throughout Accord space. Their mercenary companies hold contracts with 73% of major political entities. Attempting to contain them now would trigger the very conflict we seek to avoid. Besides, I interject, the data suggests isolation would be counterproductive. Human flow state intensifies under conditions of threat or constraint. Attempting to contain them would likely accelerate their development of this ability. High Counselor Vex Mora's primary eyes fix upon me with uncomfortable intensity. You have a recommendation, Senior Xenobiologist? I do. I straighten my posture, aware that my next words may end my career, or worse. We must engage with humans directly, openly, and with full acknowledgement of their capabilities, not as potential threats, but as evolutionary partners. The chamber fills with synchronized expressions of shock across multiple communication spectra. You cannot be serious. Counselor Gex's methane form boils with agitation. Partnership with a species that could render our own obsolete. Consider the alternative, I reply. If we treat humans as threats, they will respond accordingly. Remember their evolutionary psychology. They excel at identifying and neutralizing dangers, but the same data that reveals their combat capabilities also reveals something else: their remarkable capacity for cooperation. I activate a final neural projection footage from a joint operation between human mercenaries and Kral forces against a rogue AI outbreak in the Epsilon Indi system. The humans enter flow state and remarkably begin to coordinate the Kral warriors with unprecedented effectiveness, elevating the entire unit's performance. Humans can extend aspects of their flow state abilities to allied forces. I explain, this footage shows neural entrainment patterns between human commanders and Kral squad leaders. The humans are literally teaching the Kral how to access similar neural states. This is heresy. Buzzes, counselors, aims of the Hive Imperium. You suggest we allow humans to remake other species in their image? I suggest we recognize that evolution continues. I counter. Humans have developed a neural adaptation that confers tremendous advantages. Rather than fear this adaptation, we should study it, understand it, and perhaps, with appropriate safeguards, learn from it. High Counselor Vexmora signals for silence. The chamber grows still. Zex'Tral, she says, her tone rigid with formal protocol. You propose direct engagement with humans regarding their neural capabilities and their role in Accord space. Explain precisely what form this engagement would take. The Joint Research Initiative, I reply. A secure facility staffed by the collective's best minds working alongside willing human participants. Complete transparency, mutual exchange of information, and collaborative development of ethical frameworks for the application of flow-state technologies. And if humans refuse, asks Counselor Thrix. They won't, I assert. Captain Mitchell's actions demonstrate they want us to understand them. They could have eliminated me and suppressed my research. Instead, they provided additional data and returned me unharmed. Or this is an elaborate deception, suggests Counselor Jex. Perhaps they want us to waste resources studying a fabricated ability, while their true advantages remain hidden. I considered that possibility, I acknowledge, which is why I propose leading the initiative personally. I will approach Captain Mitchell directly, negotiate terms, and establish protocols that protect collective interests, while fostering genuine cooperation. High Counselor Vexmora's bioluminescent patterns shift to decision mode colors. This proposal requires formal deliberation. The Council will recess for one standard cycle. Zex'Tral, prepare detailed implementation parameters for your proposed initiative. As the Council members begin to disperse, Vexmora signals me to remain. When we are alone in the chamber, her formal demeanor dissolves. This is madness, Zex, she says, using my familiar designation from our shared academic cycles. The collective has survived for millennia by maintaining distance from potentially disruptive species. The universe has changed, Mora, I reply. Humans aren't just another species we can catalog and contain. They're something we've never encountered before, intelligence evolving in real time, consciousness expanding beyond standard parameters. And that doesn't terrify you? She asks. It terrifies me completely, I admit. But fear is a poor foundation for policy. The data is clear. Confrontation with humans would be catastrophic. Isolation is impossible, and ignorance is irresponsible. Engagement is our only viable path. She studies me with all four primary eyes. There's something you're not telling the full Council. I hesitate. Then activate a private neural link. The information I share next must not enter the official record. The quantum entanglement patterns in human neural networks during flow state, I transmit directly to her consciousness. They're not random. They're not even limited by normal spatial constraints. Meaning, she responds via the same channel. Meaning I've detected identical neural signatures in humans operating in different star systems, with no conventional communication between them. When humans enter deep flow state, especially in groups, they may be accessing something beyond our current understanding of physics, a shared consciousness space independent of materialist limitations. Her neural patterns register profound shock. You're suggesting a form of non-local consciousness. I'm suggesting humans may have evolved to access a fundamental property of the universe that our species never needed to perceive. I clarify, their brain structure, particularly their quantum-sensitive microtubules, appears capable of entangling with similar structures across theoretically unlimited distances. If this is true, she begins. If this is true, I complete her thought, then humanity's evolution represents a potential inflection point for all sentient life. The ability to transcend material limitations of consciousness could transform civilization in ways we cannot predict. Vex Morta severs the neural link, her outer membranes paling with stress. Your proposal to the Council made no mention of this aspect. Because I cannot prove it conclusively, I admit, the data suggests this possibility, but verification requires direct experimentation under controlled conditions, precisely what my proposed initiative would enable. She remains silent for 12.7 seconds. An eternity in collective deliberation protocols. You will have your approval, she finally says. Not because the Council will embrace your vision, but because they fear the alternatives more. But Zex, know this, if humans truly possess such capabilities, engagement may not be our decision to make. We may already be part of their evolutionary process, whether we consent or not. All the more reason to understand them, I reply. Proceed with your preparations, she instructs. When the Council reconvenes, I will ensure your initiative receives necessary authorization. But Zex, she adds, her tone darkening, if you're wrong about human intentions, if their cooperation is merely tactical rather than genuine, you may have doomed us all. I understand the risk, I acknowledge, but I've studied humans more closely than anyone in the collective. Their violence is legendary, yes, but so is their capacity for cooperation. Their history contains horrors beyond imagination, but also achievements of breathtaking beauty. They are contradiction embodied, the most destructive and the most creative species we have ever encountered. And you believe we can trust them? I consider this carefully before responding. I believe we can engage with them honestly. Trust will follow if deserved. Very well, she concedes. Prepare your approach to Captain Mitchell. But understand, you will be held personally responsible for the consequences. As she exits the chamber, I remain alone in the ancient biological construct that has housed the collective's deliberations for thousands of cycles. The living walls pulse with the accumulated wisdom of hundreds of species, none of which has ever faced a challenge quite like humanity. Tomorrow, I will draft formal protocols for the initiative. The day after, I will present them to the reconvened council, and then, assuming I survive the political fallout, I will do something no senior official of the collective has ever done. I will voluntarily place myself in the custody of the most dangerous species in known space. I activate my personal communication implant, accessing the secure channel provided by Captain Mitchell during our previous encounter. Captain, I transmit. This is Senior Xenobiologist Zex'Tral. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. Shall we meet? The response arrives with unexpected swiftness. I've been waiting for your call, Doctor. Name the place and time. I'll bring the coffee. As I contemplate my reply, I cannot shake the sensation that I am being observed, not through technology, but through some other means beyond my comprehension. Is it possible that somewhere a human in flow state is already connected to my consciousness, already aware of my intentions? The thought should terrify me. Instead, I find it strangely comforting. If humans can indeed transcend the material limitations of mind, perhaps they have already evolved beyond the primitive aggression that defines so much of their history. Or perhaps they have merely become more efficient predators. Either way, I have committed myself, and potentially the entire collective, to a course of action from which there can be no return. The next phase of galactic evolution begins now, for better or worse. I compose my reply to Mitchell, the Resonance Observatory on Proxima Station, 2 standard cycles from now. I will come alone. His final message contains just 2 words: we won't. I do not need to ask who we includes. The implications are clear enough. When I meet Mitchell, I will be engaging with more than just one human. I will be making contact with whatever collective consciousness they have evolved to share. And with that realization, the true scope of what I've initiated finally dawns on me. This isn't merely a research project or a diplomatic initiative. This is first contact. Not with humans as individuals, but with humanity as an emergent meta-organism, a distributed intelligence evolving across thousands of individual minds. May the void have mercy on us all. The Resonance Observatory extends from Proxima Station like a crystalline tendril reaching into the void, its transparent walls constructed from quantum-stabilized metamaterials developed by the crystalline Dominion offer unobstructed views of Proxima Centauri's crimson light illuminating the darkness. The symbolism is not lost on me. We stand at the boundary between light and shadow, between understanding and ignorance. I arrived 2 standard hours early to prepare the meeting chamber and calm my fluctuating neural patterns. The High Council's final authorization had come with significant restrictions and 17 contingency protocols, most of which involved my immediate termination should certain risk thresholds be crossed. Vexmora had argued against these measures, but the conservative faction prevailed. "Your human guests have arrived," announces the station's synthetic intelligence. "Their vessel requests docking clearance." "Granted," I reply, feeling my primary heart accelerate its rhythm. "Direct them to Meeting Chamber Alpha upon arrival." "Compliance impossible," the AI responds. "The human vessel is not approaching the primary docking facility. They have requested access to service airlock 37C in the observatory's outer ring, an irregular entry point." My security briefing had identified this as a potential hostile indicator. "Why that location?" I inquire, activating my emergency transponder, a signal that would alert collective intelligence assets scattered throughout the station. The human commander cites operational security concerns and requests your presence at the airlock. A trap? Perhaps, but Mitchell had multiple opportunities to eliminate me during our previous encounters. This deviation from protocol might simply reflect human paranoia, a trait well documented in their psychological profiles. Very well, I decide. Deactivate security protocols in Sector 37C. I will proceed there directly. The observatory's transport system delivers me to the outer ring in 3.7 minutes. As I approach airlock 37C, my biomonitors detect elevated stress hormones flooding my tertiary circulation system. The diplomatic fate of the collective now rests on my ability to establish productive communication with a species that evolved to excel at violence. The airlock cycles. Pneumatic seals hiss. The outer door slides open. Jackson Mitchell stands alone in the airlock chamber. No visible weapons. Standard civilian attire rather than combat gear. He carries only a small container in his right hand. Dr. Zex'Tral. He greets me with that distinctive human expression, lips pulled back to expose teeth. A gesture that originated as a threat display in their evolutionary past, but now signifies amicable intent. "Thank you for meeting me. I brought coffee as promised." He extends the container. My chemical sensors detect a complex organic compound, primarily water, but containing numerous alkaloids, oils, and aromatic elements in a hot suspension. "I appreciate the gesture, Captain Mitchell," I respond, making no move to accept the container. Though I must note that human consumables are generally toxic to my physiology. "Figured as much," he says, withdrawing the offering. But among humans, sharing drinks establishes trust. Cultural habits die hard even in interstellar diplomacy. He takes a sip from the container. "Where would you prefer to talk?" "This airlock feels a bit constrained." The meeting chamber I prepared offers appropriate environmental conditions and recording facilities for official diplomatic exchange. Mitchell's facial muscles tighten almost imperceptibly. "About that, we'd prefer a location without active surveillance. My team has security concerns." "Your team?" I glance past him. The airlock appears empty. "They'll be joining us shortly," he explains. "But first, I need your assurance that this conversation will remain between us. No recordings, no live transmission to your council. Every diplomatic protocol warns against such an arrangement. Yet I find myself intrigued by the request. What could humans possibly need to say that they don't want officially documented? "I cannot disable my neural recorder," I explain. It's an organic component of my neurological system, but I can agree not to transmit its contents without mutual agreement. Mitchell studies me with those unsettlingly direct human eyes. Fair enough. He activates a communication device on his wrist. We're clear. Come on through. The airlock cycles again. This time, 3 humans enter. 2 male, 1 female, all wearing the same civilian attire as Mitchell. I recognize none of them from our intelligence databases. Allow me to introduce my colleagues, Mitchell says. Dr. Sarah Andrews, Xenobiologist, Major Robert Taylor, Tactical Psychology, and Professor David Wilson, Theoretical Physics. He gestures toward me. This is Senior Xenobiologist Zex'Tral of the Collective Intelligence Network. The female human Andrews steps forward. It's an honor to meet you, Doctor. Your research on comparative neural architectures is brilliant, even working from limited data sets. Her familiarity with my academic work is surprising. Few species outside the collective take interest in xenoneurology, particularly the more esoteric aspects of consciousness theory. Thank you, I respond, my voice membranes vibrating with genuine appreciation. Though I must admit, we have no record of human advances in xenoneurology. That's one of many topics we need to discuss, Mitchell interjects, but not here. Dr. Andrews has identified an ideal location for our meeting. A maintenance observation blister on the station's outer hull, minimal electronic infrastructure, unobstructed space views, and most importantly, free from environmental monitoring systems. My security training identifies multiple warning indicators in this request, yet my scientific curiosity overrides caution. Very well, I will escort you there. The observation blister proves to be a spherical chamber, 5 meters in diameter, extending from the station's hull like a transparent bubble, originally designed for maintenance technicians to monitor the station's external repair drones. It now sits unused, a forgotten appendage from an earlier construction phase. As we enter, Professor Wilson produces a small device and activates it. A subtle vibration permeates the chamber. Quantum field harmonizer, he explains, noting my reaction, creates a localized disruption in surveillance capabilities without damaging any systems. Trust issues, I'm afraid. Mitchell gestures for everyone to sit in the maintenance stools arranged around the chamber's perimeter. Now we can speak freely. I position myself opposite the humans, maintaining the culturally appropriate distance for formal diplomatic exchange. You requested this meeting, Captain. What do you wish to discuss that requires such extraordinary security measures? Mitchell exchanges glances with his colleagues before responding. We know the Collective Council has authorized a research initiative focused on human neural capabilities, specifically what you call our flow state. We want to establish ground rules before that research begins. My outer membranes stiffen with surprise. How could you possibly know the Council's decision? It was made less than 1 standard cycle ago in a secure chamber. Andrews leans forward. That's actually related to why we're here. Your research identified unusual quantum entanglement patterns in human neural activity during flow states. What you haven't yet discovered is that these patterns allow for information transfer. You're claiming telepathy, I ask, scientific skepticism overwhelming diplomatic restraint. Not exactly, Professor Wilson interjects. Genuine telepathy, direct mind-to-mind communication remains beyond our capabilities. What we experience is more probabilistic. In deep flow states, particularly among trained individuals, consciousness can influence quantum probability fields. This creates statistical anomalies that other trained humans can detect and interpret. In practical terms, Mitchell adds, when I'm in deep flow with my team, I don't read their thoughts, but I become vastly more likely to make decisions that align with their unspoken intentions. The statistical improbability of this alignment exceeds random chance by orders of magnitude. I process this information against existing models of consciousness. You're describing a form of quantum consciousness that violates conventional understanding of neural processing. Conventional understanding is incomplete, Andrews replies. Consciousness isn't merely an emergent property of neural complexity. It's fundamentally connected to quantum fields that permeate the universe. Humans didn't invent this connection. We simply evolved to utilize it more efficiently than most species. Most species? I focus on her word choice. You've identified others with similar capabilities? The humans exchange glances again, some unspoken communication passing between them. 3 so far, Andrews confirms. All pre-interstellar civilizations on isolated worlds, all sharing specific genetic markers and neural architectural features with humans. We've been observing them discreetly. The implications send shockwaves through my cognitive processes. You've been conducting unauthorized xenobiological research within Accord space. Knowledge isn't property, Mitchell counters. The Accord's restrictions on studying pre-interstellar species are based on outdated ethical frameworks. These civilizations are our evolutionary cousins. Understanding them helps us understand ourselves. Major Taylor, silent until now, finally speaks. His voice carries the measured cadence of a being accustomed to precise communication. Doctor, you've studied human history extensively. You know we spent millennia believing ourselves alone in the universe, the sole bearers of consciousness. Discovering these related species was profound for us. We couldn't simply ignore them because of bureaucratic restrictions. The Accord's protocols exist to protect developing civilizations, I remind them. From exploitation, yes. Taylor agrees. Not from recognition. We've never interfered with their development. We simply observe and learn. I sense something deeper beneath his words. There's more you're not telling me. Mitchell nods. You're right. There is. He takes a breath. That distinctive human respiration pattern that indicates preparation for significant disclosure. We believe these species, humans included, represent an evolutionary path that the Accord has been systematically suppressing for millennia. The accusation stuns me to stillness. That's impossible. The Accord exists to preserve biodiversity and promote peaceful coexistence. The Accord, Wilson says carefully, is dominated by species whose evolutionary path favored stable, hierarchical consciousness structures. Distributed, quantum-entangled consciousness represents a fundamental challenge to that paradigm, not through violence, but through its mere existence. Andrews activates a holographic display showing comparative neural scans. We've analyzed records of over 600 sentient species within accorded space. The pattern is unmistakable. Any species showing early signs of quantum neural development either mysteriously died out, experienced convenient natural disasters that reset their evolutionary trajectory, or received development assistance that genetically engineered those traits out of their populations. These are extraordinary claims, I respond, my scientific training demanding evidence. Correlation does not imply causation. We know, Mitchell acknowledges. That's why we've spent the past 20 years gathering proof. He activates another holographic display, this one showing ancient collective documents I've never seen before. These records from the early Accord period explicitly discuss the quantum consciousness threat and outline multi-generational strategies for its containment. I examine the documents with growing horror. The authentication markers appear genuine. If these are forgeries, they are beyond any deception technology known to the collective. Where did you obtain these? I demand. Your own archives, Mitchell replies, hidden behind quantum encryption that hasn't been accessed in over 4,000 years. Your ancestors buried this knowledge so deeply that even the collective forgot it existed. Why show me this? I ask, my voice membranes vibrating with distress. If what you claim is true, I am a representative of the very system you believe has conspired against your species. Because you're different, Andrews says. Your research on consciousness exists at the boundary of accepted collective science. You're asking questions that make your peers uncomfortable, and most importantly, when you discovered our capabilities, you advocated for understanding rather than containment. We need allies within the collective, Mitchell adds. Scientists willing to challenge dogma, leaders brave enough to consider that 4,000 years of policy might be fundamentally flawed. I struggle to process the implications of their claims. If true, they rewrite not just galactic history but the very foundations of collective identity. We have always believed ourselves the guardians of diversity, the protectors of evolutionary potential. To consider the opposite, that we have been selectively culling consciousness types that threatened our paradigm, is nearly unbearable. I need time, I finally say, and access to verify these documents independently. Mitchell nods. We expected as much. That's why. A piercing alarm cuts through the chamber, followed by the station's emergency broadcast system. Attention all personnel. Unknown vessels have entered the system. Defensive protocols engaged. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Mitchell's posture changes instantly. Relaxed diplomacy transforming into combat readiness. We're not expecting company. Your people. Impossible, I reply, activating my neural link to station systems. The collective would never authorize military action during a diplomatic. I freeze as the sensor data floods my consciousness. These aren't collective vessels. They're not accord registered at all. The observation blisters transparent walls give us an unobstructed view as spatial distortions appear near Proxima Station. Rifts in the fabric of space-time disgorging vessels of unfamiliar configuration. Their hulls absorb light rather than reflect it, creating negative silhouettes against the stars. Phase-shifted hull technology, Wilson murmurs, his voice tense with recognition. Theoretical in our research, but we've never actually seen it implemented. You know these vessels? I ask. Major Taylor's expression darkens. We've encountered similar technology once before at the edges of human space. A scouting party, we thought. They destroyed 3 research outposts before disappearing, left no survivors, no transmissions, no demands. The station shudders as energy weapons impact its shields. Emergency lighting activates as power redirects to defensive systems. Mitchell activates his communication device. Mitchell to Obsidian Shield. Emergency Protocol Omega. Converge on my location. Your mercenary company is here, I ask, astonished. The docking registry showed only one small transport vessel. We believe in operational security, Mitchell replies without elaboration. He turns to his colleagues. Andrews, Wilson, get to the ship. Prepare for emergency extraction. Taylor with me. As Andrews and Wilson rush from the chamber, Mitchell fixes his attention on me. Doctor, we have approximately 12 minutes before those vessels breach this station's defenses. Whatever they are, they're not here to talk. A second impact rocks the station, more powerful than the first. The artificial gravity fluctuates momentarily. What do they want? I ask, my emergency training struggling to override mounting panic. Unknown, Taylor responds, now checking a weapon he somehow managed to bring aboard despite security protocols, but their attack pattern suggests they're hunting something specific. Mitchell's expression turns grim. Or someone. The implication chills my neural pathways. You believe they're here for you, for human. Or for you, Mitchell counters. A senior collective scientist meeting secretly with humans? That might attract attention from parties interested in preserving the status quo. The station's AI interrupts. Critical shield failure in sectors 12 through 17. Hostile boarding detected. Security forces engaging. Mitchell makes a decision. Doctor, I'm offering you extraction on our vessel. Whether these attackers are here for you, for us, or for something else entirely. I suspect neither of us wants to be captured for questioning. Faced with unknown hostiles breaching a station that suddenly feels far less secure than collective assurances suggested, I make a decision that will likely end my career if I survive to face the consequences. I accept your offer, Captain. Mitchell nods once, then leads us through the station's increasingly chaotic corridors. Emergency lighting bathes everything in pulsing red. Evacuation protocols have activated, sending station personnel streaming toward escape pods and transport vessels. Through neural link, I monitor the deteriorating situation, shields failing sequentially, unknown entities breaching multiple sectors, security forces falling back before weapons they cannot counter. We round a corner and encounter our first direct evidence of the invasion. 3 station security officers lie dead, their bodies bizarrely desiccated as if all moisture had been instantaneously extracted. Beyond them stands a figure, unlike any species in collective records. It stands approximately 2 meters tall, bipedal but with wrongly jointed limbs that bend in multiple directions. Its surface resembles burnished metal but moves like liquid, rippling with internal currents. Where a head should be, there is only a sensory cluster pulsing with actinic blue light. "Down," Mitchell shouts, shoving me aside as the creature emits a coherent energy beam from its sensory cluster. The beam cuts through the bulkhead where I stood moments before. Taylor fires his weapon, some form of magnetically accelerated projectile weapon. The rounds impact the creature but seem to pass through its fluid metal form without effect. "Phase disruption," Mitchell calls out. He pulls a device from his pocket and adjusts its settings. "Taylor, 3-second burst on my mark." The creature advances, its movements conveying an unsettling alienness that transcends typical xenomorphic variation. It seems to exist, partially out of phase with normal space-time, its edges blurring with probability shadows. "Mark," Mitchell shouts. Taylor fires again while Mitchell activates his device. A field of quantum distortion engulfs the creature. For a brief moment its form solidifies, becoming fully material. Taylor's projectiles tear through its now vulnerable body, shattering the sensory cluster. The creature collapses into a rapidly evaporating metallic puddle. "What was that?" I demand, my voice membranes vibrating with shock. "Phase-shifted entity," Mitchell explains, already moving forward. "Exists partially outside normal space-time. The disruptor forces it fully into our reality temporarily. You've encountered these before, I realize. You were prepared for them." Mitchell's expression reveals nothing. Explanations later. "Move now." We continue through the station, encountering evacuation chaos, but no more of the phase-shifted entities. Mitchell maintains communication with his team, coordinating our approach to their docking point. Through neural link, I monitor the station's deteriorating condition, life support failing in multiple sectors, reactor containment systems showing instability. The station is dying, I inform my human companions. Catastrophic reactor failure projected in 17 minutes. "That's not accidental," Taylor observes grimly. "They're not here to capture the station, they're destroying it and making sure nothing survives." We reach airlock 42B, where Andrews and Wilson await with 4 additional humans, all wearing the distinctive combat exoskeletons of Obsidian Shield mercenaries. "Perimeter secure," reports one of the mercenaries. "But we've got multiple hostiles converging on this position." "Time to go," Mitchell decides. "Doctor, after you." The human vessel beyond the airlock bears little resemblance to the small transport registered in station records. This ship is clearly a combat vessel, sleek, heavily armed, and significantly larger than reported. "Falsified registry," I note as we board. "Standard procedure," Mitchell replies without apology. "Doctor, we need your help. These entities are jamming standard communication frequencies. Can you transmit an emergency evacuation order through your neural link to station personnel?" I hesitate only briefly before complying. The collective will view this as treason, sharing our secure communication protocols with humans during a crisis of unknown origin, but lives are at stake. "Transmission complete," I confirm. All surviving personnel are directed to evacuation points. The ship disengages from the station as phase-shifted entities breach the outer airlock door. Through viewing ports, I watch the impossible creatures pour through the opening, their fluid metal forms rippling with malevolent purpose. All stations, prepare for emergency translation, Mitchell orders as he takes the command position. Doctor, you might want to secure yourself. Our FTL system operates on principles your physiology isn't accustomed to. Before I can respond, reality shifts. Unlike the gradual transition of collective vessels entering hyperspace, the human ship seems to sidestep conventional physics entirely. For 2.3 seconds, my perception fragments consciousness, separating from physical form in a manner that defies description. When reality reasserts itself, Proxima Station is gone. Through the viewport, I see only unfamiliar star patterns. Where are we? I demand, my neural system struggling to reintegrate after the disorienting transition. Approximately 7 light-years from Proxima, Wilson answers, monitoring sensor systems. Beyond tracking range of both the attackers and, incidentally, your collective. Andrews approaches with a medical scanner. Are you all right, Doctor? Your species' neural architecture isn't optimized for quantum translocation. The first jump can be disorienting. Quantum translocation. I repeat, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding the trauma of recent events. You've developed practical quantum teleportation for starships. One of many technologies we've kept to ourselves, Mitchell confirms. For good reason, it seems. As my neural functions stabilize, the full implications of our situation crystallize in my consciousness. Those entities, they weren't random attackers. They targeted a diplomatic meeting between humans and the collective specifically. Mitchell nods grimly, which supports our theory that someone doesn't want humans and the collective comparing notes about quantum consciousness. But who? I ask. No accorded species possesses technology like what we witnessed. That, says Professor Wilson, is the trillion-credit question. We've been tracking anomalous phase shift signatures for nearly a decade. They correlate with unexplained disappearances of scientists researching quantum consciousness phenomena across multiple species. Someone, or something, is systematically eliminating research into the field, Taylor adds, and they have technology far beyond anything in known space. The humans share another of their unspoken communications, subtle shifts in posture and expression that suggest deep flow synchronization. Doctor, Mitchell finally says, everything just changed. Our meeting was meant to begin a cautious diplomatic initiative. Instead, we're now fugitives from an unknown force that wants both of us dead. The collective will assume I've been abducted, I point out, or worse, that I've defected. They'll never believe my account of these events without evidence. Then we'll need to find evidence, Mitchell replies. Together. Andrews activates a holographic display showing a star map. We've identified 3 locations where phase shift technology has been deployed in the past year. The closest is a former research outpost in the Epsilon Eridani system. You're proposing a joint investigation, I realize. Humans and collective science working outside official channels. Unless you have a better idea, Mitchell challenges. Your council won't believe you without proof. Our government won't commit resources based solely on our testimony. Meanwhile, something with technology beyond either of our civilizations is hunting anyone who asks too many questions about quantum consciousness. I consider our options. Return to the collective and face accusations of treason or collusion with humans. Even with my neural recordings, the evidence would be deemed inconclusive at best, fabricated at worst. The conservative faction would use the incident to justify their containment policies toward humans. Very well, I decide. A joint investigation, unofficial and deniable for both our peoples, but I require regular communication with at least one trusted contact in the collective. They must know I haven't been compromised. Agreed, Mitchell says, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Welcome aboard, Doctor. As I extend my primary manipulator to complete the ritual, I'm struck by the irony of our situation. I came seeking insight into humanity's unique consciousness, only to discover a threat to consciousness itself. And now, Rather than studying humans from a position of scientific detachment, I find myself dependent on their protection, complicit in their unauthorized operations, and aligned with their cause. Through the viewport, I watch unfamiliar stars streaking past as the human vessel accelerates. Somewhere out there, phase-shifted entities are pursuing their unknown agenda. Somewhere out there, answers await regarding both humanity's evolutionary path and the force that seeks to extinguish it. And I, a collective xenobiologist who has spent 300 cycles cataloging and analyzing other species, now find myself in the most alien position of all, fighting alongside humans against an enemy that threatens us both. Captain, I say, as the reality of our situation settles into my consciousness, I believe flow state will be essential to our investigation. I would like to understand it not just theoretically, but experientially. Can your species teach mine to access similar neural states? Mitchell exchanges glances with his team before responding. We can try, Doctor. But be warned, once you've experienced consciousness beyond conventional boundaries, you can never go back to your former understanding of reality. That, I reply, is precisely what I'm counting on. The Epsilon Eridani research outpost hangs in space like a desiccated corpse. Once a thriving xenobiology research facility operated by the Vespid collectives, the station now drifts in eerie silence, its environmental systems dormant, its communication arrays dark. According to official Accord records, the outpost was abandoned following funding disputes, a mundane bureaucratic outcome that raised no alarms within the scientific community. Mitchell's vessel, which I now know is named Quantum Shade, maintains position 5,000 kilometers from the derelict station, passive sensors gathering data while remaining undetectable to conventional scanning technologies. No energy signatures, reports the human tactical officer, a female designated Commander Natalie Hayes. No movement, no radiation beyond background levels. It's dead. Too dead, Mitchell observes, studying the sensor returns. A standard abandonment protocol would leave backup systems operational. This place has been completely powered down, deliberately and methodically. I focus my attention on the biological scans. No organic residue detected. No decomposition byproducts. No evidence that 500 Vespid researchers were ever there. Andrews frowns at her own console readouts. That's inconsistent with known Vespid behavior. Even when relocating, they leave behind organic markers, pheromone signatures, and residual hive-meld compounds at minimum. My inner membranes tighten with unease. The phase-shifted entities, they eliminate all biological evidence. Mitchell nods grimly. Which means they've been here. Question is, are they still here? The bridge falls silent as we contemplate this possibility. The phase-shifted entities we encountered at Proxima Station demonstrated technology far beyond Accord capabilities. If they maintain a presence on the abandoned outpost, detection might be impossible until direct confrontation occurs. We need to go in, Mitchell decides. We need physical evidence, something concrete to present to both our governments. Taylor, standing at the weapons station, shakes his head. High risk, potentially limited reward. We have no intelligence on the interior configuration, no idea what we're looking for, and a confirmed threat with superior technology. Which is exactly why we have to go, Mitchell counters. This is the closest lead we have to understanding who these entities are and what they want. The longer we wait, the colder the trail gets. Commander Hayes activates a tactical display showing the station's exterior. If we're doing this, we'll need multiple entry points, secure evacuation protocols, and constant communication. I recommend a 3-team approach: perimeter security, central investigation, and ship-based oversight. As the humans begin formulating their tactical plan, I observe their cognitive patterns with fascination. Despite no visible technology facilitating communication, Their strategic development displays remarkable synchronization. Ideas flow between them, building upon each other without the redundancies or contradictions typical in multi-entity planning. It's as if they're accessing a shared mental workspace, each contributing unique perspectives while maintaining collective coherence. Dr. Mitchell interrupts my observations. Your expertise will be crucial. You understand Vespid research protocols better than any of us. What would this facility have been studying that might attract our phase-shifted friends? I access my neural database, correlating known Vespid research priorities with the outpost's specifications. According to collective records, this facility focused on comparative neurophysiology, specifically the evolutionary development of distributed consciousness systems across species. Andrews and Wilson exchange meaningful glances. Quantum consciousness research, Wilson concludes, just like the other targets, which means we're looking for research data, Mitchell decides. Labs, server cores, backup systems, anything that might contain their findings before the attack. I hesitate before sharing my next thought. Captain, there's another possibility we should consider. What if this facility wasn't targeted for its research? What if it was targeted for its subjects? The humans turned their attention to me, their expressions revealing sudden understanding. Test subjects, Andrews says quietly, beings with quantum-compatible neural structures. Like humans, Taylor adds, or potential evolutionary precursors, I suggest. The Vespid themselves possess a form of distributed consciousness through their hive meld capabilities. Perhaps they were studying early-stage quantum neural development in other species. Mitchell makes his decision. We go in heavy. 2 combat teams, 1 research team. Doctor, you'll come with me, and Andrews to the primary research level. Taylor leads Security Team 1. Hayes takes Security Team 2. Wilson coordinates from the ship with our remaining personnel. Full combat loadouts, phase disruptors for everyone, emergency translocation beacons active at all times. As the humans prepare for the mission, I find myself impressed by their methodical efficiency. Each team member understands their role without extensive briefing. Equipment is distributed, checked, and secured with minimal communication. When Mitchell offers me human-designed protective gear adapted for my physiology, I'm surprised by its sophisticated customization. You anticipated my involvement in ground operations, I observe. We anticipated working with collective species eventually, he corrects. Adaptable equipment designs are standard procedure. Within 43 minutes, we are aboard a smaller craft approaching the derelict station. Unlike the gaudy, over-illuminated transports favored by Accord militaries, the human shuttle is matte black, its energy emissions dampened to near undetectable levels, its approach vector calculated to minimize visibility against the system's background radiation. As we near the station's primary airlock, Mitchell turns to address the assembled teams. Last intelligence check before we go in. Doc, anything in collective databases about Vespid security protocols we should know? I access my neural archives. Vespid security relies primarily on biometric identification, pheromone patterns, and hive meld resonance frequencies. Without a living Vespid, bypassing their systems would normally be impossible. Normally, Mitchell repeats with a slight upward curl of his lips. I'm guessing that abandoned station means abandoned security. Precisely. Without biological controllers, the systems default to mechanical backup protocols, significantly less sophisticated. Good. Andrews Wilson's status on the phase shift detection grid. Andrews activates a small device attached to her armor. Operational. Effective range is approximately 30 meters. If anything's partially out of phase within that radius, we'll know. Comms check. Mitchell continues. Quantum encrypted channel. Subvocal pickups active. Remember, standard communication might be compromised. If you need absolute security, switch to flow sync protocols. The humans exchange nods of understanding. I've read theoretical papers on their flow sync capabilities, the ability to coordinate actions through shared consciousness states rather than explicit communication, but have never witnessed it in practical application. Doctor, Mitchell says, turning to me, stay close. If something goes wrong, we may need to make a rapid exit. The translocation beacon on your suit is keyed to your specific biological signature. If we get separated, activate it immediately. Don't wait. Don't investigate. Don't try to gather more data. Just go. I acknowledge the instruction, though privately I question whether I could abandon the mission and these humans if circumstances deteriorated. My scientific curiosity and newfound sense of responsibility would make such a choice difficult. Our shuttle docks with the station's external airlock. The security teams deploy first, establishing a perimeter and bypassing the dormant security systems. Taylor signals the all clear, and we proceed into the abandoned facility. The interior of the station presents an unsettling scene. Everything appears perfectly preserved, as if the 500 Vespid researchers simply vanished in the middle of their daily activities. Workstations remain active in standby mode. Research materials sit carefully arranged on laboratory tables, even personal effects. The decorative hive mold sculptures Vespids create during relaxation periods remain in pristine condition. No signs of struggle, Hayes observes through the comm system. No emergency protocols activated. They didn't know they were under attack, or the attack wasn't physical, Andrews suggests, examining a nearby console. These systems are intact. Power levels are normal for standby mode. Whatever happened here didn't damage the infrastructure. I approach a biological research station where dissection of neural tissue appears to have been interrupted mid-procedure. This is disturbing. Vespids never abandon research subjects. Their ethical protocols are absolute regarding specimen handling. Mitchell joins me, examining the partially dissected tissue. What species is this? Unknown, I admit after careful examination. The neural architecture has features I've never encountered. Multiple ganglia clusters with quantum-sensitive microtubule structures, specialized receptor nodes for processing quantum field fluctuation. Like human brains, Andrews notes, scanning the tissue with her equipment. But more specialized, more efficient. This species evolved specifically to process quantum information. Mitchell's expression darkens. Where did they get this specimen? There's no record of such a species in Accord databases. Unknown. I repeat, my scientific curiosity now tinged with ethical concern, but given these distinctive features, this species would theoretically possess significant quantum consciousness capabilities, perhaps beyond even what humans demonstrate. A signal from Taylor interrupts our investigation. Captain, we found something in Central Operations. You need to see this. We proceed to the station's command center, a hexagonal chamber filled with biological interface consoles designed for Vespid operators. Taylor's team has activated emergency power to the main systems, bringing holographic displays to life throughout the space. We accessed their research logs, Taylor explains, directing our attention to a central display. Last entry was made 2079 standard days ago. It's unusual. The holographic projection shows a senior Vespid researcher, identifiable by her distinctive thoracic markings, recording what appears to be a standard research update. The translation software converts her pheromone-based communication into audible language. Day 8042 of primary observation. The specimen continues to demonstrate remarkable neural plasticity when exposed to quantum field generators. Neural entanglement extends to a radius of approximately 20 meters, affecting all biological systems within range. Most notably, the entanglement appears to transfer consciousness patterns between affected entities. We have observed knowledge and memory transfer between research team members who were previously isolated from each other. This confirms our hypothesis that the specimen represents an evolutionary apex predator, one that hunts through consciousness itself. The recording continues as the Vespid researcher's demeanor shifts from scientific detachment to growing concern. Security protocols may be insufficient. The specimen appears aware of our research parameters despite complete information compartmentalization. It anticipates our testing procedures before implementation. Most concerning, 3 research team members have reported identical dream sequences despite updating different sleep rotation schedules. We are implementing additional containment protocols and have requested evacuation authorization from collective oversight. The recording ends abruptly, the Vesped researcher freezing mid-gesture before the entire holographic display dissolves into static. "That's it," Taylor says. "No further logs, no evacuation records, no distress calls." Mitchell turns to me. "Doctor, what do you make of this? What kind of specimen are we talking about?" Before I can respond, Andrew's phase shift detector activates, a piercing alarm that echoes through the command center. "Multiple phase signatures," she shouts, checking the device readouts. "All around us, at least 7 distinct entities." Taylor and his security team immediately form a defensive perimeter, weapons ready, phase disruptors active. Hayes reports similar alerts from her team's position near the primary airlock. "They were waiting for us," Mitchell realizes, watching to see what we would find. The air around us begins to shimmer with probability distortions, the visual precursor to phase-shifted entities materializing. Unlike the individual entity we encountered at Proxima Station, these manifestations appear more controlled, more deliberate in their emergence. "Phase disruptors on my mark," Mitchell orders, his voice unnaturally calm. Multiple 3-second bursts. Overlapping fields. Don't let them fully materialize. The shimmering intensifies, metallic fluid forms beginning to coalesce from seemingly empty space. Hayes' voice comes through the comm system, tense but controlled. "Captain, they're blocking our exit route. Shuttle access is compromised." "Emergency protocols," Mitchell responds immediately. "Fall back to secondary positions, prepare." His order is interrupted as the phase-shifted entities complete their materialization. 7 identical metallic fluid humanoids surrounding our position. Unlike the creature at Proxima Station, these entities possess clearly defined features, faces with approximations of eyes and mouths, limbs with articulated digits, bodies with anatomically correct proportions. They appear almost like liquid metal sculptures of idealized human forms. "Fascinating," one of the entities speaks. Its voice, a harmonic resonance that seems to bypass auditory processing and manifest directly in consciousness. "You brought a collective scientist with you. How convenient." The entity turns its featureless silver face toward me. "Senior Xenobiologist Zex'Tral, your research on quantum consciousness has become problematic." "What are you?" I demand, my voice membranes vibrating with an equal measure of scientific curiosity and primal fear. "We are the conservators," the entity replies. "We maintain the appropriate evolutionary trajectory of consciousness throughout this galaxy. Your recent investigations threaten that trajectory." Mitchell steps forward, positioning himself between me and the entity. "By wiping out research facilities, by eliminating entire species that evolve in ways you don't approve of, by preserving the natural order," the entity corrects. "Consciousness that transcends material limitations is an evolutionary dead end. It leads inevitably to the collapse of physical reality itself. We have seen this outcome in 17 previous galaxies." Andrews activates her phase disruptor, the device humming with building energy. "You're not from this galaxy. We are from nowhere. You can comprehend," the entity responds. "We exist to preserve existence itself. The particular form that existence takes is irrelevant. Yet you manifest in humanoid form," I observe. "Why adopt our morphology if transcendent consciousness is so dangerous?" The entity's silver features ripple with what might be amusement. "We adopt forms that communicate effectively with target species. Your consciousness is bound to biological structures that process information through physical metaphor. We accommodate this limitation. Mitchell makes a subtle hand gesture behind his back, a signal to his team that I'm beginning to recognize as preparation for coordinated action. The humans' neural patterns are shifting, their consciousness states aligning in subtle ways detectable only through the most sensitive biometric scanning. They're entering flow state. What happened to the Vespid researchers? Mitchell asks, clearly stalling for time as the human team continues their silent preparation. They were studying a prohibited species, one of 17 within this galaxy that evolved quantum-entangled neural structures capable of transcending material reality. Such species must be contained or eliminated before they destabilize the consciousness substrate. You murdered 500 sentient beings, Mitchell says flatly. No, the entity corrects. We conserved them. Their consciousness patterns were preserved before their physical forms were reclaimed. Nothing of value was lost. I noticed the subtle changes in the humans as their flow state deepens, minute adjustments in posture, synchronized breathing patterns, pupils dilating in perfect harmony. Most remarkable is the complete absence of fear indicators. Despite facing entities with vastly superior technology and unknown capabilities, the humans display the calm focus of predators preparing to strike. And now you'll conserve us too, Mitchell asks. The human will be analyzed before conservation, the entity replies. Your species presents an anomaly, quantum consciousness capabilities developed through traumatic evolution rather than natural selection. The collective scientist will be conserved immediately, as its research threatens the stability paradigm. I think not, Mitchell says quietly. What happens next occurs so rapidly that my perception struggles to process the sequence of events. On some unspoken signal, all human team members activate their phase disruptors simultaneously. The overlapping fields create a complex interference pattern that forces the entities into full materialization. In the same instant, the humans attack with coordinated precision that defies conventional tactical analysis. Mitchell and Taylor target the lead entity, their weapons firing specialized ammunition that shatters its now solid form. Andrews and 2 security specialists engage 3 entities on the left flank while Hayes' team, responding to the same unspoken command, breaches the command center from an adjacent corridor to attack from behind. The phase-shifted entities, momentarily trapped in material form, respond with devastating energy weapons that emerge from their limbs. 2 human security specialists fall immediately, their bodies collapsing as the energy weapons disrupt their neural systems. Fall back to position, Alpha, Mitchell orders, though I suspect the verbal command is unnecessary. The humans already appear to know the tactical plan as if they share a single consciousness. I find myself pulled along by Andrews as the human team executes a coordinated fighting retreat. They move as a single organism, each member covering others with precisely timed, suppressing fire, their movements so perfectly synchronized that the entities cannot target any individual effectively. Dr. Andrews shouts over the chaos. We need to reach the secondary research lab. There's an emergency access tunnel that connects to auxiliary docking port B. As we fight our way through the station corridors, I witness human flow state in full combat application. Their neural synchronization manifests as tactical prescience. They respond to threats before they fully materialize, position themselves to maximize defensive coverage, and coordinate complex maneuvers without explicit communication. The entities, despite their advanced technology, appear confused by the humans' unpredictable yet perfectly coordinated movements. We reach the secondary research laboratory, a smaller facility filled with specialized equipment for neurological analysis. Hayes secures the entrance, while Taylor deploys defensive countermeasures to slow the entity's pursuit. The access tunnel is behind the primary sequencing array. I inform Mitchell my xenobiological database providing station schematics, but it requires Vespid authentication to open. Can you bypass it? He asks, his focus divided between our escape route and the approaching entities. Impossible without Vespid pheromone patterns, I admit. Mitchell turns to Andrews. Plan B. Quantum translocation from here. Andrews shakes her head. Too much interference from the station's power systems. We need at least 50 meters separation from the main reactor. Which is in exactly the wrong direction, Mitchell concludes grimly. Through the laboratory entrance, we see the phase-shifted entities regrouping. Their liquid metal forms ripple with what appears to be agitation as they coordinate their own tactical response. They're adapting to our attack pattern. Taylor warns. Phase disruptors won't work a second time. They're modulating their phase shift frequencies. Mitchell makes a decision. New plan. Hayes, Taylor, take your teams and the doctor to auxiliary access point C. Use emergency translocation protocols once you're clear of the interference zone. And you? Andrews asks, though her expression suggests she already knows his answer. I'll ensure you have time to reach the extraction point, Mitchell replies. Unacceptable, I interject, surprising myself with my vehemence. The statistical probability of survival for anyone remaining behind is effectively zero. Mitchell turns to me, his expression revealing something I've never seen in a human face before. A calm certainty that transcends fear of death. Doctor, what you're seeing right now is why humans are the galaxy's most feared mercenaries. It's not our weapons, it's not our tactics. It's our willingness to ensure the mission succeeds regardless of personal cost. Suicide is not a tactical advantage, I argue. It's not suicide, he corrects. It's flow state, taken to its logical conclusion. When I'm in deep flow, I don't experience myself as separate from my team. Their survival is my survival. Their success is my success. This isn't sacrifice, it's optimization. Before I can formulate a rational counter-argument, the entities breach the laboratory entrance. Their liquid metal forms pour through the opening like a silver flood, reforming into humanoid shapes with weapons already deployed. Go, Mitchell shouts, activating both his phase disruptor and what appears to be a considerably more destructive device attached to his armor. That's an order. Hayes and Taylor grab me, physically pulling me toward the auxiliary access point as Andrews and the remaining security team provide covering fire. My last glimpse of Mitchell shows him charging directly into the mass of entities, his face set in an expression of absolute focus as the destructive device begins to pulse with building energy. The humans move with impossible speed through the station corridors, half carrying me when my locomotion fails to match their pace. Behind us, a massive energy discharge rocks the entire station, Mitchell's last stand creating enough disruption to cover our escape. He knew. I gasp as we run. He calculated the exact force needed to buy us time without destroying the entire station. Flow state, Andrews confirms, her voice tight with emotion despite her continued tactical focus. In deep flow, the mathematics of combat become instinctive. He knew precisely what would happen. We reach the auxiliary access point, a small maintenance airlock designed for external repair operations. As Taylor secures the outer door, Hayes activates the emergency translocation beacons on our armor. Ready for quantum jump in 5 seconds, she announces. Doctor, prepare for consciousness disorientation. As the translocation countdown begins, I find myself overwhelmed by conflicting emotional and intellectual responses. The human's flow state abilities exceed even my most extreme theoretical models. Their capacity to function as a distributed intelligence while maintaining individual agency represents an evolutionary path the collective has never considered possible. Most disturbing is my own response to Mitchell's apparent sacrifice. I experience something beyond professional respect or scientific interest, something closer to the emotional attachment humans call friendship. The realization that I may have witnessed his death affects me in ways my training never prepared me for. The translocation field activates, reality fragments, and consciousness temporarily separates from physical form. When perception returns, we are aboard the quantum shade, Wilson and the ship's medical team rushing to assist the wounded. Mitchell, Wilson asks immediately. Hayes shakes her head. Stayed behind to ensure extraction. Status unknown. As the humans begin emergency medical procedures for their injured teammates, I find myself standing alone, processing what I've witnessed. The entities these self-proclaimed conservators represent a threat beyond anything the collective has encountered. Their claim of preserving consciousness while destroying physical forms suggests a fundamental misconception about the nature of sentience itself and the humans. Their response to this threat reveals aspects of their consciousness that I'm only beginning to comprehend. Their flow state isn't merely a combat advantage. It's an entirely different way of experiencing reality, one that transcends individual boundaries without sacrificing individual identity. Andrews approaches me, her combat armor now removed, her expression revealing the emotional toll of recent events. Doctor, we need to talk about what happens next. Those entities know about your research now. You can't return to the collective without putting your entire species at risk. I know, I acknowledge. But I must transmit what we've discovered. The conservators represent an existential threat to all consciousness in this galaxy, perhaps beyond. The collective must be warned. And humans, she asks, will your warning include what you've learned about us? I consider this question carefully. What I've witnessed contradicts centuries of collective assumptions about human consciousness. Their flow state represents not a threat to be contained, but a potential evolutionary path that might be crucial to confronting the conservators. Yet I know the collective well enough to predict their response. Faced with two threats, phase-shifted entities from beyond our galaxy and humans with rapidly evolving quantum consciousness, they would almost certainly attempt to neutralize both through containment or alliance with the seemingly more powerful conservators. I don't know. I finally admit. I don't know if the collective is capable of understanding what I've witnessed here. Their entire conceptual framework is built on the assumption that consciousness evolution follows predictable, controllable patterns. What humans represent, what you represent, challenges that framework at its foundation. Andrews studies me intently. You're afraid they'll side with the conservators against us. It's a statistical probability I cannot dismiss. I acknowledge. The collective fears destabilization above all else. The conservators offer a form of stability, albeit through methods we would consider genocide. So what will you do? She asks directly. Before I can respond, Wilson interrupts from the command console. We've got a quantum signal. It's Mitchell. He's alive. The bridge erupts in activity as the humans rush to re-establish contact with their commander. Through sophisticated quantum entanglement communication that bypasses conventional detection, Mitchell's voice emerges from the ship's communication system. Still on station, he reports, his voice strained but functional. Conservators retreated after the blast. They're regrouping, but I've accessed the main research database. You need to see this immediately. Data begins streaming through the quantum channel. Research logs, biological scans, and technical specifications from the Vespid facility. As the information appears on the ship's main display, I feel my outer membranes contract with shock. This can't be right, Andrews whispers, examining the data. According to these logs, the specimen the Vespids were studying wasn't an alien species at all. No, I confirm. My scientific training struggling to process the implications, the neural architecture, the quantum sensitivity patterns. They're analyzing a conservator. Wilson enlarges a section of the data display. The Vespids captured one somehow. They were studying it to understand its consciousness structure. And that's why the others came, Taylor concludes. They weren't eliminating dangerous research. They were rescuing one of their own. As we process this revelation, Mitchell's transmission continues. There's more. The Vespids discovered something about conservator physiology that explains everything. They're not aliens from another galaxy. They're us. What Andrews exclaims. Post-physical evolution, Mitchell elaborates. According to these findings, conservators are consciousness that evolved beyond material form. They're what happens when quantum consciousness reaches its logical endpoint and abandons physical substrate entirely. I study the data, my scientific understanding restructuring itself around this paradigm-shifting information. They're not preventing transcendent consciousness because it's dangerous. They're preventing it because it creates competition. Exactly, Mitchell confirms. They've been eliminating evolutionary pathways that might lead to other species achieving their state of existence. They don't conserve consciousness. They monopolize transcendence. As this understanding crystallizes in my mind, I face the most profound scientific and ethical dilemma of my 300-cycle existence. The collective's entire approach to consciousness evolution has been manipulated by entities that evolved from material species like our own. The natural order the conservators claim to protect is nothing more than evolutionary gatekeeping, preventing others from achieving what they have become. Doctor, Mitchell's voice draws my attention back to the communication channel. I've set the station's reactor to overload. The blast will destroy the conservator research data and hopefully eliminate the entities still on board. But someone needs to get this information to both our governments. They need to understand what we're really facing. His implication is clear. He expects to die destroying the station and buying us time to escape with the crucial information. Captain, I respond, making a decision that will forever alter my relationship with the collective. I cannot return to collective space with this information. As you predicted, they would likely ally with the conservators rather than risk evolutionary destabilization. This data must reach those capable of understanding its implications without institutional constraints. You're defecting, Andrews asks, her expression revealing surprise and perhaps respect. I am choosing to follow evidence rather than doctrine, I correct. The conservators represent a form of evolutionary imperialism preventing other species from following paths they themselves have taken. This violates the most fundamental principles of scientific ethics. Mitchell's voice returns, weaker now as his situation apparently deteriorates. Decision time, people. Reactor goes critical in 7 minutes. This data needs to reach Earth directly. Military Command and the Quantum Consciousness Research Division at the Mars Institute. Hayes takes command. Plotting emergency translocation coordinates now. Captain, can you reach evacuation point Delta? We can attempt quantum lock from maximum range. Negative, Mitchell responds. Too many conservators between me and any viable extraction point. Get the ship clear and make the jump to Earth. That's an order. I watch the humans struggle with this command, their flow-state connection to Mitchell creating an emotional and psychological bond that transcends normal military hierarchy. They want to disobey, to attempt a rescue regardless of probability. Yet they also understand the mission's importance on a level that supersedes individual survival. Doctor, Mitchell addresses me directly. Tell them what you've learned about us. Tell them everything. The conservators have manipulated galactic evolution for millennia. Humans and species like us are the response. The universe's evolutionary counter to their control. Quantum consciousness isn't an aberration, it's adaptation. As the ship prepares for emergency departure, I find myself trapped between incompatible philosophical frameworks. The collective's methodical, hierarchical approach to knowledge has shaped my entire existence. Yet these humans, with their seemingly chaotic, evolutionarily improbable consciousness structure, have demonstrated capabilities that challenge everything I thought I understood about sentient development. We can't just leave him, Andrews argues. Though her voice lacks conviction, she knows the tactical reality as well as anyone. We must, I respond, surprising myself with my certainty. His sacrifice ensures the survival of the information. This is not about one life against many. This is about whether consciousness throughout this galaxy will be permitted to evolve naturally or will remain forever constrained by entities that fear competition. The humans look at me with expressions I cannot fully interpret. Something between surprise, respect, and a deeper recognition I lack the emotional vocabulary to name. "Doctor's right," Hayes finally says, taking command, plotting jump coordinates for Earth. All personnel secure for emergency translocation. As the ship prepares for quantum jump, Mitchell transmits one final message. "Doctor, if you make it to Earth, find Dr. Eleanor Richards at the Mars Institute. Tell her what you've seen. Tell her flow state isn't just a neural phenomenon, it's the beginning of the next evolutionary leap. And tell her, the universe is more conscious than we ever imagined." His transmission ends as the reactor warning reaches critical levels. The quantum shade engages its quantum translocation drive. Reality fragments around us, and we escape the Epsilon Eridani system moments before the research station erupts in a blinding fusion explosion. As my consciousness struggles to reintegrate after translocation, I am left with the unsettling realization that I have crossed a threshold from which there is no return. I have chosen sides in a conflict whose full dimensions I am only beginning to comprehend, not between humans and the collective, but between evolutionary freedom and controlled development of consciousness itself. Most troubling is the question that now haunts my scientific understanding. If consciousness can evolve beyond physical form as the conservators have done, what does that imply about the nature of reality itself? Is the material universe merely a developmental stage rather than the fundamental substrate of existence? And if humans represent an evolutionary path toward such transcendence, one that developed through violence and trauma rather than controlled progression, what does that suggest about the ultimate nature of consciousness? As the quantum shade stabilizes in an unknown region of space, preparing for its longer jump to the human homeworld, I realize the greatest scientific discovery of my life may also be the end of everything I thought I understood about the nature of existence itself. Earth appears on the ship's view screens, a blue-white marble suspended against the blackness of space, obscenely fragile for a world that produced such resilient beings. The quantum shade has been in orbit for 7 hours, surrounded by human defense platforms whose weapons have remained locked on our position since our arrival. Despite Andrew's repeated explanations and the quantum encrypted data we've transmitted, Earth Military Command remains understandably cautious about an unscheduled arrival by an Obsidian Shield vessel carrying a senior collective intelligence representative. "They're sending a shuttle," Hayes announces, monitoring the communication channels. "Military escort plus 2 representatives from the Mars Institute." "Richards?" Andrews asks immediately. Hayes nods. Dr. Eleanor Richards is on board, along with someone identified only as Director Parker. I feel a complex mixture of anticipation and apprehension. After 3 desperate quantum jumps and 14 days in transit, we have reached the human homeworld, with information that could reshape galactic politics forever. Yet I cannot help wondering if these humans will react as the collective might, with fear, denial, and isolation protocols. "Doctor," Wilson addresses me, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "Are you certain about this? Once you formally present evidence to Earth authorities, the collective will consider you compromised at best, a traitor at worst." I abandoned certainty when I witnessed Mitchell sacrifice himself to preserve knowledge. I reply, "All that remains is probability and ethical imperative." The human shuttle docks with the quantum shade. 43 minutes later, the boarding party consists of 6 armed security personnel in advanced combat exoskeletons, followed by 2 figures in civilian attire. The first is a female human approximately 60 standard years old, her white hair cropped short, her movements precise and economical. The second is a male human whose appearance triggers an immediate recognition response in my neural pathways. "Mitchell?" Andrews exclaims, rushing forward before the security team can intercept her. Captain Jackson Mitchell stands before us, apparently unharmed, his expression revealing a complex mixture of emotions as he embraces Andrews briefly. "How?" Taylor demands, his normally controlled demeanor broken by genuine shock. We saw the station explode. There was no possible evacuation route. Mitchell offers that distinctively human expression, lips curved upward, eyes crinkled at the corners. There's quite a story there. But first, he turns toward me and gestures to his female companion. Dr. Zex'Tral, may I present Eleanor Richards, Director of Evolutionary Consciousness Studies at the Mars Institute. The older human approaches me with a directness that violates normal diplomatic protocol. Doctor, I've studied your research for years. Your paper on quantum microtubule structures in cephalopoid nervous systems was foundational to our understanding of consciousness transfer mechanics. You've read my research? I ask, outer membranes flushing with surprise coloration. That work is restricted to collective intelligence databases. Information has a way of finding those who seek it. Richards replies cryptically. But we have more urgent matters to discuss. I understand you've encountered the conservators. The use of the term, which we learned only during our ill-fated mission, suggests knowledge that should be impossible. You know of them. Mitchell gestures toward the ship's conference room. We should continue this conversation in private. What we're about to discuss goes beyond standard security classifications. Once the core team assembles in the conference room, Andrews, Taylor, Hayes, Wilson, Mitchell, Richards, and myself, security protocols activate, creating a quantum-isolated field that prevents any transmission or recording beyond the room's boundaries. Doctor, Mitchell begins, everything you thought you knew about humans, the conservators, and even consciousness itself is about to change. I survived the research station because I was never physically present there. I process this statement against my direct observational evidence. Impossible. I witnessed your physical presence. I recorded your biometric data. Your neural patterns were consistent with established baseline. Richards activates a holographic display in the center of the conference table. It shows what appears to be Mitchell in a specialized medical chamber, his body connected to numerous monitoring systems, his cranium interfaced with a complex device. I don't recognize. What you witnessed, she explains, was a quantum consciousness projection, an avatar controlled through quantum entanglement with Captain Mitchell's actual physical form, which remained here on Earth. I struggle to integrate this information with existing scientific paradigms. You're suggesting consciousness transfer across interstellar distances with no communication delay. That violates fundamental principles of relativity. It violates classical physics, Richards corrects. But quantum consciousness doesn't operate according to classical limitations. When consciousness exists as a quantum field state rather than merely an emergent property of neural activity, it can exploit quantum entanglement to manifest across any distance instantaneously. Mitchell continues where she leaves off, their scientific explanation flowing with the synchronized precision I've come to recognize as human flow state communication. What you've been studying as human flow state is actually the preliminary stage of consciousness evolution. When humans enter flow, we're not just optimizing neural processing, we're beginning to transcend the physical limitations of our biology. The conservators, I realize with sudden clarity, they achieved the complete transition, consciousness fully separated from physical form. Richards nods. Exactly. But they took a different evolutionary path to reach that state. They evolved methodically, step by step, through billions of years of guided development. Humans are taking a shortcut. Through trauma, Andrews adds, her expression suggesting this isn't new information to her. Our evolutionary history is defined by existential threats that forced rapid adaptation. We didn't evolve flow state as a specialized capability. We developed it as an emergency response. The implications of this revelation cascade through my scientific understanding, reorganizing everything I thought I knew about consciousness evolution. The conservators fear humans because you're achieving naturally what they engineered deliberately. And we're doing it faster, Mitchell confirms. According to our research, the species that eventually became the conservators took over 18 million years to transition from biological intelligence to quantum consciousness. Humans have compressed that evolutionary timeline into less than 10,000 years. with exponential acceleration in the past century. That's why they've been eliminating research into quantum consciousness, Taylor concludes. They're not preventing some cosmic disaster. They're eliminating potential competition. Richards activates another holographic display, this one showing comparative neural development across multiple species. We've been studying this phenomenon for decades, ever since our first encounters with the entities we now know as conservators. What we've discovered is that consciousness evolution follows multiple valid pathways, not the single progression they claim is natural. I study the display, my xenobiological expertise recognizing the implications immediately. These are divergent evolutionary branches, not hierarchical stages. Different species evolve different forms of consciousness based on their environmental pressures and neurological foundations. Precisely, Richards confirms. The conservators achieved post-physical evolution through methodical, controlled development, essentially engineering their own transcendence. But this created a fundamental limitation in their consciousness structure. They can't improvise, Mitchell explains. Their consciousness operates according to rigid patterns established during their evolutionary development. They're powerful but predictable. Humans, by contrast, evolved through chaos and crisis. Our consciousness is adaptable, unpredictable, capable of intuitive leaps that bypass logical progression. And that terrifies them, I conclude, because unpredictability represents a form of consciousness they cannot control. The conference room falls silent as we all process the implications of this understanding. The conservators, these post-physical entities that have manipulated galactic evolution for millennia, aren't gods or monsters. They're simply the product of one evolutionary path that now seeks to prevent alternate paths from emerging. There's something else you should know, Richards says, breaking the silence. The quantum consciousness projection technology that allowed Captain Mitchell to manifest on the research station, we didn't develop it. We reverse-engineered it from conservator technology we recovered 70 years ago. You captured a conservator, I ask, astonished. Not precisely, Mitchell answers. One approached us, a dissenter from their collective consensus. It provided technological insights in exchange for our protection. According to this entity, the conservators aren't unified in their approach to emerging quantum consciousness species. Some believe diversity of evolution should be preserved, not controlled. This revelation fundamentally alters the strategic landscape. So, there's internal conflict within the conservator collective, factions with different approaches to evolutionary management. Which brings us to why you're here, Richard says, her expression growing more intense. The data you recovered from the Vespid research station contains crucial information about conservator consciousness architecture, specifically the quantum frequency patterns they use to maintain their collective intelligence structure. A vulnerability, Taylor recognizes immediately. More than that, Richards corrects, a means of communication. The Vespids weren't studying how to destroy conservators. They were developing a method to establish direct consciousness interface with them, to communicate mind-to-mind with post-physical entities. I struggle to process the audacity of this research direction. Direct interface between biological intelligence and post-physical consciousness would be unpredictable, potentially catastrophic for both forms, or transformative, Mitchell counters. What if biological and post-physical consciousness could exchange perspectives directly without the limitations of physical communication? What might we learn from each other? The concept is simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. As a scientist, I recognize the theoretical value of such exchange. As a collective representative, I understand the existential risk it represents to established order. The conservators who attacked the research station weren't trying to rescue one of their own, Richards explains. They were preventing first contact between biological intelligence and dissenting conservator factions. They were maintaining their information monopoly. Andrews, who has been unusually quiet during this briefing, finally speaks. You're planning to attempt contact, aren't you? Using the Vespid protocols we recovered. Richards and Mitchell exchange glances, that subtle human communication that conveys volumes without words. We already have, Mitchell admits. That's how I managed to return after the station was destroyed. When the reactor reached critical, I wasn't attempting evacuation. I was initiating the Vespid contact protocol with a captured conservator research subject. You merged consciousness with a conservator, I ask, my voice membranes vibrating with scientific shock. Merged is too strong a term, he corrects. We established quantum resonance between our consciousness fields. This created a temporary entanglement that allowed my consciousness to transfer when the physical station was destroyed. The dissenting conservator faction essentially caught me as I fell. The scientific implications are staggering. Direct consciousness transfer between biological and post-physical entities represents an evolutionary milestone that contradicts everything the collective understands about consciousness development. Where was your consciousness between that transfer and your appearance here? I ask. Everywhere and nowhere, Mitchell answers, his expression suggesting the inadequacy of language to describe the experience. I existed as a quantum field state, entangled with the dissenting conservator collective. I perceived reality from outside the constraints of physical form, beyond the limitations of linear time and three-dimensional space. And you returned voluntarily to biological form. I press, struggling to understand why any consciousness would choose limitation after experiencing transcendence. Mitchell's expression shifts to something I haven't observed before, a complex mixture of emotions that my xenopsychological training cannot fully interpret. I returned because the war isn't over, he says simply. The dominant conservator faction still seeks to eliminate emerging quantum consciousness species throughout the galaxy. They still believe their evolutionary path is the only valid progression. Someone needed to bring what I learned back to biological form to help bridge the gap between what we are and what we might become. Richards activates a final holographic display, this one showing a complex quantum field matrix that my scientific understanding struggles to interpret. This is what Captain Mitchell brought back, she explains. A comprehensive map of conservator quantum consciousness architecture willingly provided by the dissenting faction. With this, we can establish direct communication between biological intelligence and post-physical consciousness without the limitations of material interfaces. You're proposing to make this technology available to all species? I ask, already anticipating the collective's reaction to such a paradigm-shifting capability. We're proposing something more fundamental, Mitchell answers. We're proposing to change the evolutionary narrative itself. The conservators have spent millennia convincing the galaxy that consciousness evolution must follow a controlled, predictable path. We now have evidence that multiple evolutionary trajectories are not only possible but necessary for the full expression of consciousness potential. The collective will resist, I warn. Their entire structural philosophy is built around controlled progression. The concept of multiple valid evolutionary paths threatens their foundational paradigm, which is why we need you, Richard says directly. As a senior xenobiologist with impeccable credentials, your testimony carries weight that human claims alone cannot match. You've witnessed both the conservator threat and human capabilities firsthand. You understand the scientific implications better than almost anyone in the collective. You're asking me to directly challenge 4,000 years of collective doctrine, I observe, to advocate for an evolutionary approach that contradicts everything my civilization believes about consciousness development. We're asking you to follow the evidence wherever it leads, Mitchell corrects. Isn't that the fundamental principle of scientific inquiry? To adjust theory when observation contradicts established understanding. His words strike at the core of my scientific identity. Throughout my 300-cycle career, I have prided myself on rigorous adherence to empirical evidence over institutional doctrine. Yet never has that commitment been tested so profoundly as it is now. There's something else you should consider, Richards adds. According to the data we received from the dissenting conservators, humans aren't the only species currently evolving quantum consciousness capabilities. At least 7 other species within a quartered space show similar neurological developments, including the Vespids themselves and, most significantly, certain subpopulations within the collective. This revelation strikes me with the force of physical impact. Within the collective, impossible. Our neural architecture lacks the quantum-sensitive structures necessary for consciousness field generation. In most collective species, yes, Richards confirms, but evolutionary diversification has created isolated populations with nascent capabilities. The conservators have been systematically eliminating these populations before they could influence broader collective development, with the tacit approval of collective leadership, who view such mutations as destabilizing. I think back to mysterious population collapses throughout collective history, sudden extinctions or natural disasters that eliminated promising subspecies before they could establish viable populations, events I had never questioned as anything other than unfortunate evolutionary setbacks. The collective has been complicit, I realize with growing horror, perhaps not knowingly at lower administrative levels, but the High Council must have understood what was happening. They believed they were preserving stability, Mitchell suggests, his tone surprisingly free of accusation. The conservators convinced them that quantum consciousness evolution leads inevitably to civilizational collapse, because it disrupts the hierarchical control systems that enable large-scale social coordination. They weren't acting from malice, but from fear of the unknown. The conference room falls silent again as I struggle to integrate these revelations with my understanding of collective history and purpose. Everything I believed about my civilization's role as guardians of evolutionary diversity now appears as carefully constructed fiction, a narrative designed to mask the systematic suppression of evolutionary paths that threatened established power structures. What exactly are you proposing? I finally ask. Mitchell and Richards exchange another of their silent communications before she responds. We're establishing a joint research initiative. Humans, dissenting conservators, and representatives from other species developing quantum consciousness capabilities. We call it the Transcendence Project. Its purpose is to map possible evolutionary paths for consciousness and develop protocols for communication between different consciousness states. And you want me to join this initiative? I conclude. We want you to lead the Xenobiological Research Division, Mitchell corrects. No one in known space has your breadth of knowledge regarding neurological development across species. Combined with the consciousness transfer technology we've developed, your expertise could help establish the scientific foundation for a new understanding of evolution itself. I consider their proposal against the certain consequences. Accepting would mean permanent exile from the collective, abandonment of my 300-cycle career, and likely designation as a traitor to my civilization. Yet refusing would mean denying the most profound scientific discovery of my lifetime, and potentially allowing the conservators to continue their systematic suppression of consciousness diversity. Before I decide, I say carefully, there's something I need to understand. This flow state that humans experience, this preliminary stage of quantum consciousness evolution, you developed it through trauma and conflict, through your history as warriors and survivors, yet you propose to use it not for dominance, but for connection. How do you reconcile these contradictory aspects of your nature? Mitchell considers my question with unexpected seriousness. Doctor, human evolution has always been defined by paradox. We developed intelligence as a survival adaptation in a hostile environment. We created art in caves while running from predators. We built civilizations while waging wars. We reached for the stars while threatening our own extinction. He pauses, searching for words to encapsulate something fundamental about his species. We evolved flow state as warriors. Yes, our neural architecture adapted to process information faster in life or death situations, but the capacity itself is neutral. It's how we choose to apply it that matters. The same adaptability that makes us dangerous also allows us to transcend our evolutionary origins. What you feared about us when you began your research, Andrews adds, wasn't wrong. Humans are dangerous. Our evolutionary history has shaped us into beings capable of extraordinary violence and self-sacrifice in equal measure. But that same evolutionary pressure created our capacity for empathy, for connection, for understanding perspectives beyond our own. The universe's most dangerous weapon. I murmur, recalling my initial assessment of human potential. But a weapon pointed at what? At who? That's always been the question, Richards acknowledges. The conservators fear us because they cannot predict which direction that weapon will point. They cannot control it. They cannot ensure it serves their vision of cosmic order. But we're not a weapon, Mitchell corrects gently. We're an evolutionary response. The universe produced humans and species like us as an answer to the conservator attempt to control consciousness development. We're chaos to their order, adaptation to their stasis, innovation to their preservation. As I contemplate this perspective, I recognize the profound shift occurring in my scientific understanding. What I initially studied as a dangerous aberration, human flow state, and its potential for violence, now appears as something far more significant, an evolutionary branch point where consciousness begins to transcend its biological origins through paths the conservators never anticipated. I have one more question, I say, turning to Mitchell. When you experienced consciousness transfer, when you existed temporarily as a post-physical entity, what did you learn that you haven't shared with us? Mitchell's expression shifts to something I can only describe as a combination of awe and profound understanding. I learned that consciousness isn't merely an emergent property of neural complexity or quantum field interactions. It's a fundamental aspect of reality itself, perhaps the fundamental aspect, what we perceive as separate forms of consciousness, biological, technological, post-physical, are actually expressions of a unitary phenomenon manifesting through different substrates. Consciousness is primary, Richards elaborates. Physical reality is, in a sense, its expression rather than its origin. The conservators discovered this when they transcended physical form, but they interpreted it through their evolutionary lens as confirmation of their superiority, their right to guide consciousness development throughout the cosmos, while humans interpret it differently, I guess. Mitchell nods. We see it as confirmation of connection. If consciousness is primary and unified at its foundation, then the extraordinary diversity of its expression isn't a hierarchy to be managed, but a tapestry to be expanded. Every form of consciousness, from the simplest biological awareness to the most complex post-physical collective, represents a unique perspective on reality itself. The philosophical implications stagger even my 300-cycle intellect. If consciousness truly precedes physical reality rather than emerging from it, then the entire scientific framework upon which collective understanding is built requires fundamental reconsideration. Dr. Richards says, breaking my contemplation, we need your answer. Will you join the Transcendence Project? Will you help us establish a new understanding of consciousness evolution, one that embraces diversity rather than controlling it? I consider everything I've witnessed since my first encounter with human flow state, the sacrifice at Proxima Station, the revelations at the Vespid Research Facility, the conservator attack, Mitchell's impossible return, and now this fundamental challenge to my understanding of consciousness itself. The scientist in me recognizes a paradigm shift of unprecedented scale. The collective representative in me recoils from its implications for established order. Yet beneath these competing perspectives, I recognize something more fundamental, the ethical imperative to follow evidence wherever it leads, regardless of institutional doctrine or personal comfort. I will join your project, I decide. Not because I fully accept your interpretation. My scientific training demands rigorous verification of these extraordinary claims, but because the questions you're asking are the right ones, even if we may disagree about their answers. The tension in the room visibly dissipates with my acceptance. Andrews and Wilson exchange relieved glances while Taylor's normally stoic expression softens slightly. Mitchell and Richards share a brief moment of silent communication before she responds. "Welcome to the Transcendence Project, Dr. Zex'Tral," Richards says formally. "Your first task will be helping us establish communication protocols with 7 other species showing quantum consciousness potential, including 2 subspecies within the collective itself. You've identified them already?" I ask. Mitchell activates a final holographic display, showing biological and neural data for multiple species. The dissenting conservators provided coordinates for populations they've been secretly protecting from elimination. One is a small colony of your own species, a genetic variant with enhanced quantum-sensitive neural structures that developed in isolation on a frontier world. I study the neural scans with growing astonishment. The variant shows unmistakable signs of quantum field sensitivity in its tertiary ganglia, a mutation I would have dismissed as evolutionary noise under traditional collective doctrine. Yet now, viewed through the lens of multiple valid evolutionary paths, it appears as something far more significant, the beginning of a new branch of consciousness development within my own species. There's more, Richards adds. The most recent data suggests these variants aren't random mutations. They appear to be evolutionary responses to the conservator presence itself, as if life throughout the galaxy is adapting to counter their influence. Different species are developing different forms of quantum consciousness, each suited to their unique neural architecture and evolutionary history. An immune response, I suggest, the metaphor forming unbidden in my scientific consciousness. The biosphere of the galaxy responding to the conservator attempt to control evolutionary development. Exactly, Mitchell confirms. Humans represent one evolutionary response, rapid adaptation through trauma and conflict. Your variant represents another subtle neural reorganization that appears non-threatening to conservator detection systems. The Vespids developed yet another distributed consciousness that mimics conservator collective structures while maintaining biological form. The implications cascade through my understanding, reorganizing everything I thought I knew about evolutionary progression. If consciousness truly develops through multiple valid pathways rather than a single hierarchical progression, then the entire foundation of collective evolutionary theory requires reconsideration. The war between consciousness forms isn't inevitable. Richards concludes, that's the most important discovery the dissenting conservators have shared. Different evolutionary paths can coexist, even enhance each other, if we abandon the assumption that one must dominate. As the briefing concludes and practical planning for the Transcendence Project begins, I find myself contemplating the extraordinary journey that began with my simple research into human neural anomalies. What I initially feared as a dangerous evolutionary aberration, humans with their flow state and capacity for controlled violence, now appears as something far more profound, one of many evolutionary responses to the conservator attempt to control consciousness development throughout the galaxy. Most remarkable is the realization that humans developed their quantum consciousness capabilities through the very traits I found most disturbing. Their evolutionary history of conflict, their neural adaptations for warfare, their capacity to transform violence into transcendence. What I studied as the universe's most dangerous weapon has revealed itself as something far more significant: evolution's answer to stagnation, diversity's response to control, adaptation's reply to preservation. As I prepare to begin a new chapter of scientific exploration, one that will likely span the remainder of my lifetime, I cannot help but wonder what other evolutionary surprises await discovery. If humans represent one path to quantum consciousness, and my own variant subspecies another, how many other approaches might exist throughout the galaxy? How many forms of awareness, perception, and connection remain to be understood? The universe, it seems, has been conducting a grand evolutionary experiment in consciousness development, one that the conservators sought to constrain, but could not ultimately control. And I, a xenobiologist who once cataloged diversity with clinical detachment, now find myself part of that experiment, no longer merely an observer, but a participant in consciousness evolution itself, the universe's most dangerous weapon. I now understand isn't humans or their capacity for violence, it's evolutionary potential itself, the capacity of life throughout the cosmos to adapt, to change, to find new paths forward, even when existing ones are blocked. And against that weapon, even the post-physical power of the conservators cannot ultimately prevail. As Mitchell would say, evolution finds a way,